Here we go. Free agency eve, legal tampering to begin on Monday. How active will the San Francisco 49ers to be? Reports about guys that could be coming in and could be going out of the 49ers organization. One guy sticking around. Colton McKivitz extended. What does it mean? All that and more coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Crocky209. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We love all the everydayers, and we love it when you subscribe on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150. If your bet wins, visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Oh, there's some interesting nuggets from Mike Silver of the San Francisco Chronicle. He's a plugged-in guy talking about things that could happen for the 49ers in this legal tampering period. Could happen early in free agency, could be maybe second wave free agency. We'll see what of that comes true. We'll make sense of what he had to say about the 49ers, but we got to start with moves they've already made, Croc. This one's somewhat unexpected and somewhat annoying to some fans, as we've talked so much about the biggest need for the 49ers, what they might do in the draft, offensive line, and particularly right tackle. It's a big conversation around the 49ers this offseason, and organizationally, it's something they have to figure out short and long term. And Colton McKivitz, whether he starts at right tackle or not, is going to be around for another year. And when I say another year, I'm not even talking about 2024. He was already under contract, Croc, for 2024. They signed him to a 1-year extension in 2025. So they added a year to his contract, $7 million, according to his agent, with 65% of that guaranteed. So 1 year, $7 million added to his contract that he's going into the contract year of in 2024. So now 2 more years to go on Colton McKivitz's contract. He's under contract for about $3 million, I think, in 2024. Now $7 million, 1 more year added to that in 2025. What was
your 2 years, $10 million?
2 years, 10, 11 million. Yeah, is where he's at right now.
He has been a starter for the 49ers, right? Like, he started last year. And I know there's a lot of people that want to replace him, but you got starter level productivity out of him, even if he wasn't like a great starter. And I actually would say down the stretch, is it me or did he not feel like he was an issue? That's my biggest thing when it comes to guys that are more, I don't know, backups or whatever, right? I talk about that a lot with the cornerbacks. Like, are you a liability? Did it feel to you like down the stretch McKivitz was a liability? Because I kind of just forgot about him.
He was kind of what you expected. He's a smart, tough guy that battles and wins some and loses some. And in the NFL, that's not one of the top tackles in the league. Is he a nightmare? Was he an absolute problem? No, I don't think he was that. So if you're talking 2 years, $11 million for a guy who can start at right tackle for you, that's not bad money, right? My whole question with Colton McKivitz is, why are you adding a year? Just why is the question. Well, he's already under contract for 2024. So what are you trying to say to us? Are you trying to tell us that you're locking him up because he's the starter in 2024 and 2025? And you want that position to be done and set? Or are you just telling me you like Colton McKivitz, and if you draft a guy at 31, he might not be ready to start in week 1. McKivitz might still be better. So he needs to be around to start there. Maybe he needs to stick around to be a swing tackle too. Maybe he needs to start at right guard because the guy you draft at 31 is going to be right tackle. Maybe you go into the free agent market and you end up signing a guy to start at one of those spots. And you want to make sure that you have the other spot covered. So I think it's about depth. It's about a guy who can start at multiple positions on your offensive line, Croc, but you already had that. So I add the 2025 year. That's the angle I'm not sure about. And I will add this to it and remember this, it's tampering eve. We're going to see a ton. We've already seen rumors of contracts that are about to get done for players and teams. The first contract numbers that you see come from the agent, and they are in some cases completely bogus, and in other cases just like not quite 100% accurate. Or
Kendrick Bourne. Did you see what Kendrick Bourne, the reported money?
Yeah.
So it's like he's probably not getting that.
11 million a year, 3 years, 33. I'm not so sure about that, right? That's one of those initially, you're like, really? Okay. That's
coming off of a torn ACL. But again, it's good for the agent to kind of get that number out there.
Right.
So it makes him look good.
The agent wants the biggest number out immediately. And he wants the number out of the full contract, even though if you look at a 4-year contract, you're like, well, this is a 2-year contract because there's 2 huge years at the end that this guy's never going to see, So that's part of it as well. So you always got to wait for the structure. Hashtag wait for the structure. You're going to see a lot of that on Monday. And it might even be as small as that contract is, like 1 year, $7 million is not a big contract. That might be part of it with Colton McKivitz. Like, I want to see what the structure is. Was the guarantees, like, did they just lock in guarantees for what his contract was in the upcoming year? And that's part of it. So his actually doesn't have a lot of guarantees in 2025, so he could still be cut if the 49ers want to. Is the $7 million number even right? What was that part of, like, did they just move $3 million of that into 2025? Right. And sort of, was it like almost like a restructure with an additional year? So I'm waiting for I think the structure of the Colton McKivitz contract will even help us understand what's going on, even if it's just legitimately 100%, they added a 1 year, $7 million in 2025. I don't think that changes the plan. And I think that's the point we want to drive home here, Croc, to the listeners who might be like, why the heck? You got to replace Colton McKivitz. He's terrible. Colton McKivitz is a good football player. You want to have some continuity on your offensive line. He could potentially start at right guard for you if you bring in a tackle. He could start some games or even all season for you at right tackle. Maybe you need a swing tackle and he ends up playing 2 or 3 games because Trent Williams gets hurt every year for a couple of games, right? So maybe he's the best option the 49ers have just to make sure you are set at multiple positions on your offensive line. And yes, he may end up needing to start week 1, but I don't think it changes the plans. If the 49ers are on the clock at 31 and there's a tackle they like, they're going to draft the offensive tackle. And 1 more year for $7 million of Colton McKivitz is not going to change that.
It really reminded me a lot of a few years back. The 49ers did this kind of extension with Emmanuel Mosley. And it was at a time where they had him locked up for another year, but then they did something and converted it, and it essentially made it to where they had him for 2 years. So you kind of had Emmanuel Mosley, who at the time, I don't know if they were sure, is this guy going to be a long-term starter for the 49ers? Are we trying to replace him or not? But it kind of gives you that flexibility of, if he's on the team, great. If he ends up being a starter or even a good starter, right? Because McKivitz, and I don't know if it's because of where he was drafted, but usually you get more than a season to know if somebody is going to potentially get better. So whatever we saw from McKivitz this past season, could he be a little bit better? And again, I don't know. Maybe he's just what we saw, and that's all he'll ever be. But I do remember with Emmanuel Mosley, a guy who was an undrafted free agent, he stepped in, did well in place of Ahkello Witherspoon. Well, I don't think they knew exactly what they were getting. So they ended up kind of doing this thing where they end up having for 2 years, and it was very low money. Ended up kind of being a steal until he ended up hitting the market after the ACL injury and whatnot. So I saw this. I saw a lot of people kind of up in the arms about bringing back McKivitz for that amount of money, or at least extending him. I didn't see an issue with it. If he doesn't get better, okay, whatever. You got low money. They could probably let him go. I bet there's not a whole lot of guaranteed money. If you draft somebody, there's no rush to have to play this person. But if he ends up going in and beating him out, then great. And as we've seen with Kyle Shanahan, 49ers, they seem to do that a lot. Like, kind of have a guy in place. Okay, we like this guy. If you could beat him out, go ahead, beat him out. If you can't, then okay, we'll wait. We saw it with Aaron Banks. We saw it with Trey Lance. And I think now we're seeing it with whatever happens with McKivitz and a potential guy they draft.
Croc, we've got breaking news, and it looks like
I thought they were trolling in the chat. So Armstead really released?
Apparently, there's reports that Armstead is officially going to be released now, and that goes right along with what we heard from Mike Silver earlier Sunday. Let's get into that next. We'll read the tweets. We'll read the reports. Arik Armstead, is he done as a San Francisco 49er? Next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, patience. What brings home the Lombardi Trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. I love the Guaranteed Fit. I used eBay Motors to get a new fender flare in my car, popped off when I ran over a cone. It was super easy to find the part I needed. I saw the green check, so I know it was going to fit. And yes, it was a perfect fit and super easy to install. Save myself a whole bunch of money, by the way, doing it myself. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that W, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. According to reports, Arik Armstead is going to become a free agent, Croc. And this is one I did not necessarily see coming, because it really felt like Arik Armstead was going to be a 49ers lifer with his work on and off the field. He was already the longest tenured San Francisco 49er going into 2024. And I don't even know who the longest tenured 49er is. I don't know if there's anybody that predates the Shanahan-Lynch era anymore. And it was Jimmy Ward and it was Arik Armstead. And Arik Armstead was, I think, the last holdover from that regime. Let us know in the chat who is.
It might be, George Kittle and that class, that 2017 class.
And so the first round picks are gone, right? So it's not either one of them. George Kittle's a fourth rounder.
It might be George Kittle.
I think it's George Kittle. Yeah. Fourth round pick from 2017. Let us know in the chat who's been around longer than Kittle's as a fourth round pick in that 2017 draft. According to Jordan Schultz, sources to Bleacher Report say that 49ers star defensive lineman Arik Armstead has decided to become a free agent and will be released. Armstead comes off a 6-tackle, 1-sack performance in the Super Bowl and ranks 4th in playoff sacks among all active players. His 8 playoff sacks rank 2nd all-time in franchise history. This is an interesting report because he has decided to become a free agent and will be released. So that means he didn't want to do some sort of a restructure that the 49ers want. That's how I read that report from Jordan Schultz. And that goes along with what Mike Silver had reported earlier Sunday about what could potentially be going on with the 49ers, starting with the legal tampering period in free agency on Monday. Michael Silver reported that paying for an edge rusher could mean parting ways with defensive tackle Arik Armstead and going cheaper opposite Javon Hargrave. Keep an eye on former 49ers defensive tackle DJ Jones, likely to be cut by the Denver Broncos. More on the reports about edge rushers and what the 49ers could do from Michael Silver there, but we got to focus on Arik Armstead here, Croc, because Armstead's been a phenomenal 49er. He's been a really good player, underrated league-wide for a long time. He does have a big contract. Now, this has to be a post-June 1 cut, Croc, because it would be $25 million in dead money if he was cut today, but he can be cut with a June 1st designation, which means he's still a free agent, but bookkeeping-wise, he's actually technically cut with the post-June 1st designation, which means it's his dead cap money is going to be spread over the next 2 seasons, 2024 and 2025, which means the 49ers save $18 million by releasing Arik Armstead. So if it was up to Armstead, that tells me that he said he'd rather be a free agent than do some sort of a pay cut restructure that the 49ers came to him and his agent with, which means they're going to release him instead of him doing a new deal with the 49ers and restructuring his contract, meaning Arik Armstead, once this all becomes official, will be a free agent and no longer a San Francisco 49er.
I think first let's just talk about his tenure with the 49ers, right? There's a lot about Trent Baalke that people don't care for, but when you look at guys like Armstead, Jimmy Ward, DeForest Buckner, there were some solid picks in there. And, Arik Armstead has been the ultimate pro on and off the field. His teammates call him the blueprint. So this is a guy that has meant a lot to the 49ers organization, a lot to, and I'm familiar with Sacramento and that environment and how they feel about Armstead, out there. He's been a big staple with a lot of what the 49ers have going on since he's been drafted. So before we get into, talking about him being released and how much money it saves and all of that, for me, it's more so about kind of the person and human element, the business aspect of what goes on in the NFL. And it's tough to watch a guy like him who serves so many different roles on the 49ers team to be let go. But you kind of saw it coming. You said you didn't see the writing on the wall coming, but I would say, with some of the injuries kind of slow him up, you don't see quite the sack production outside of, some postseason sacks. I think with the amount of money he was making, I thought that would be something that could potentially happen really this offseason. You don't know, it's not something for sure, but it definitely was one of the things where I could see them doing this with this guy, and it was Armstead.
Well, there was very few guys where you could look at and say this player could help the 49ers get significantly under the cap and allow them to do some other things they might want to do this offseason. Arik Armstead was one of them. Christian McCaffrey is another name. That wasn't going to happen. Juszczyk, yes, but that's just a couple of $1 million versus the potential $18 million savings of someone like Arik Armstead. I thought the reason I didn't see it coming is I just thought he was too good of a player. He's been such a good 49er that it would be a restructure and not something where he was released. And I also because it was a June 1st thing, and the immediate release wouldn't really make sense. But now with the way they do things in the NFL, you don't have to wait until June 1st to do the June 1st designation on a roster maneuver anymore. So that's what it looks like is going to happen here with Arik Armstead. If these reports are true, we don't know if it's happened yet, but we will find out. And I'm sure we'll know by Monday morning when you hear this podcast on your way to work, and maybe by the end of us recording here Sunday night, we'll have more details on this. Arik Armstead, though, it sounds as if his time with the San Francisco 49ers is done. As Cubs 3EB says in the chat, absolutely nothing except absolute thanks, appreciation, and overall fond memories. Always a Niner. Thank you, Eric. Well said there. Yeah, I mean, a perennial Walter Payton Man of the Year award candidate for the 49ers. Love the sack celebration, rubbing the tummy, right? And I love Arik Armstead, really good player. He's been such a good 49er. I don't know what else to say. He's still playing at a high level when he was on the field, but I think his contract was the one that was going to help the 49ers the most. But at the same time, Croc, you have to replace him now with a starting caliber defensive tackle because Javon Kinlaw is a free agent. He can't replace, even if they bring him back, he can't replace Arik Armstead, in my opinion. If you ask John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, would they have rather just not done the Javon Hargrave deal and just kept Arik Armstead instead? Would they have rather had Armstead than, is Javon Hargrave that much better right now than Arik Armstead? But obviously with the newer contract, it's not one that they could create cap space with Javon Hargrave. So it becomes a moot point there. If you have to move one of them, it has to be Arik Armstead because of his contract. So and by the way, Deebo Samuel is another guy post June 1st. You could save some money there. I don't think the 49ers want to do that. Maybe next.
I don't see them doing that at all.
Yeah, but here's the thing: is how do you get better from Armstead at defensive tackle? Right? Do you go there at pick 31 now? Do you go into free agency? DJ Jones is a good player. Is that better than what the 49ers had on the defensive line? Could they get worse on the defensive line this offseason, Croc?
Well, we've talked a lot about, or at least me. I wanted to see the 49ers get some, big guys there in the middle. And now when you talk about losing Armstead as well, and again, Kinlaw, there's no contract in place with him, I think kind of puts the 49ers in a tight spot a little bit, especially in the interior there. Now, do you draft, a tackle at 31? I still think at that point you kind of prioritize the edge if you're going to go that route. And obviously, best player available, who's highest on your board, all of those things. But are the 49ers now looking at a potential tackle at that spot? And are there tackles? I mean, it feels like with defensive tackles, you go top 15 or you go third round, or fourth round. How many times do you see a legit stud tackle go at the end of the first round? I feel like they're taking kind of top 10, top 15, and then you don't see those guys again, almost like center. Center, you might see one, top 20. Maybe it's very rare, but if they're not taken in the top 20, you don't see them go again until third round, like Creed Humphrey. He was always good, but it's you're a center and you didn't get drafted in the top 20, so you'll go in the third round.
Right. Yeah, either you're just like, oh, this guy's a stud, he's going to be a perennial All-Pro, or this position doesn't get drafted here. And so I could see that. I've seen a couple names attached to the 49ers at 31. There's Johnny Newton out of Illinois, right? I haven't put on his tape yet, but now I think we're going to have to start looking a little bit closer at defensive tackles. There's a lot of 3 technique type of tackles in this draft class. Maybe DJ Jones is the short-term option there to shore up your run defense, Croc. And if you go that route, what's all this extra cap space for? Well, they got to operate. They've got to add some depth, and they've got to sign their draft picks. But according to Mike Silver, who clearly has already been right, it looks like about one of the things he's hearing about the 49ers. What about the other stuff he's hearing about the 49ers? And might this clear some space to do something next to whoever's playing Arik Armstead's position across from Nick Bosa at edge on the 49ers defensive line, defensive end potentially? Could that be the move now for the 49ers when legal tampering opens? We'll get into that next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to the busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sports book. I can't believe it's already March. The tourney is here, and you can get in on all that action at FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's right, $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all in the tournament at FanDuel, and $200 extra bucks to do it with if that first $5 bet wins. All you got to do is go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. All right, this opens up. There was this hint out there. There was a vibe that the 49ers could do something big, and you didn't see it coming last offseason with Javon Hargrave. And this offseason was like, okay, not a lot of cap space. Could they do something big? Would it be trade? Would it be free agency? And now potentially $18 million extra to work with this offseason with the potential release, as reported, of Arik Armstead. Does that money just get shifted right over to defensive end, Croc? And according to Mike Silver, that is potentially what's on tap for the 49ers, starting with the legal tampering period on Monday. This from Michael Silver about the 49ers movements possibly this offseason. And here we go. Here's from Mike Silver. He's got a whole thread on Twitter, by the way, at Mike Silver. And it starts with that he expects the 49ers to approach free agency and the legal tampering period Monday with a sense of urgency at the edge rusher position opposite Nick Bosa. That doesn't mean they will jump immediately or overpay. They want value. Still, with players like Danielle Hunter, Jonathan Greenard, Leonard Floyd out there, they'd be poised to move quickly at the right price. They're also monitoring the potential trades releases of Chargers edges, Khalil Mack and or Joey Bosa. They'll do something, all caps, Mike Silver believes. And he went on to say, paying for edge could mean parting ways with defensive tackle Arik Armstead, cheaper route potentially there, like ex-49er defensive tackle and nose tackle DJ Jones, who is likely to be cut by the Denver Broncos. Michael Silver goes on to say they'll look at cornerbacks outside and slot, given Lenoir's flexibility, possibly someone like Packers' Keyshawn Nixon, who's an accomplished return man as well. And by the way, they do need a return man because Ray McLeod is also a free agent, although they could bring back any of their in-house free agents and re-sign them. They'd also like an off-ball linebacker given Greenlaw's injury, but Azeez Al-Shaair is likely too expensive to bring back. Safety, tight end, interior offensive line, and wide receiver are other areas of interest. Interior offensive line, not tackle. There is no clear sense of whether they will pay Brandon Ayuk. Again, it may come down to value or rethink their approach at that position. They have 11 draft picks, some of which can serve as trade capital. Bottom line, says Mike Silver, with Brock Purdy still on a rookie deal, the 49ers remain in win-now mode. However, patience may be a virtue this week. Biding their time and landing an accomplished edge rusher at value would would be cause for celebration. So there you go. That from Mike Silver, the latest rumors about what the 49ers could be doing. And it looks like part of that at least is happening with Arik Armstead. So then they turn their attention to edge rusher, which also opens up the opportunity, Croc, for a blockbuster of a trade with the Carolina Panthers that we talked about last week, I think it was, or maybe a couple weeks ago. Brian Burns is out there. And if they're willing to listen on Brandon Ayuk and they have enough money to pay somebody opposite Nick Bosa, could Brian Burns be the move there? I mean, at this point, you can't rule anything out with this football team, Croc.
Well, I mean, what would they have to give up to get a guy like Brian Burns?
Brandon Ayuk.
So on social media right now, if you go on the formerly known as Twitter, but the X, and there are people of other teams talking about potential trade for Brandon Ayuk. And if you look at the fans and some of the things that they're thinking, they're like, oh, we'll give you pick like 34, maybe. But no, we don't even want to give that up.
I saw a second and a fourth from the Carolina Panthers, pick 34 and whatever their fourth round pick is, because the Carolina Panthers don't have a first round pick and they needed to go hunting for a wide receiver. And my response to that, to the Carolina Panthers, if I'm John Lynch, is, well, second round pick's not going to get it done. And you don't have a first round pick. So the only thing that could get it done is Brian Burns.
Do you look at pick 33 and say, like, that is, like, all second round picks aren't created equal? Like, if you get the 49ers second round pick, that's pick 62.
63, yeah.
63. Like, that's not the same as, second round pick. Panthers pick 33 or whatever it is.
The only difference value-wise between the 49ers pick at 31 and the Panthers pick, which is the first pick in the second round at pick 33, right?
Yeah.
It's two slots. It's the same pick, except the fifth-year option that you potentially get by drafting a first-round player. That's it. So 31's a little bit more value, but not a lot more valuable than pick 33. And in some cases, maybe it's depending on the position. It doesn't matter at all if you get that fifth-year option anyway. So, yeah, that's, it's not a first round pick. It's a second round pick, but it's pretty close to a first round pick. And the 49ers have obviously had some open communication with the Carolina Panthers. Did their GM get fired?
I think they all got axed over there. I think GM too. The head coach, definitely.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if it's the same GM or not. I think it's the same GM that traded the 49ers, Christian McCaffrey. No?
I'm looking right now.
I can't remember if it's GM as well. But either way, they all got each other's phone numbers.
Oh, it's Dan Morgan. I think he.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, Dan Morgan.
I think Dan Morgan just took over.
Yeah,
2024. Yeah.
Yep.
He was assistant GM though. So I mean, he was in those talks. Dan Morgan, he was a good football player.
According to Josina Anderson, her sources said that it wouldn't even be second round value for Brian Burns potentially because of the deal the team would have to do. Which I don't buy that. The thing. What I don't doubt that a source told her that, but I do question the source's motives because that's BS. I mean, the Panthers are getting more than a third round pick for Brian Burns. It might not be the 2 first rounders that the Rams offered a couple years ago, but there's a big difference between 2 firsts and 1 third round pick.
So they are saying the third. Well, okay. So here's the thing. Let's say hypothetically speaking, it's the Panthers. Would you do Brandon Ayuk for Brian Burns straight up?
That's a completely fair trade. I think Brian Burns plays a more valuable position and is a more valuable player than Brandon Ayuk. So I think the 49ers would say yes to that trade and would win that trade. I question, though, whether the 49ers, if they don't want to pay Ayuk, they probably don't want to pay Brian Burns. What the 49ers probably want, and I think Silver laid it out, and it's something we've talked about. I've been talking about this for a long time, Croc. Joey Bosa, Nick's brother, is going to have this roster bonus or guarantees kick in on like next week. March something is the date. He's going to get cut before that. The 49ers could potentially re-sign Brandon Ayuk and just sign Nick's brother instead of doing something super major and spending all that money because Joey Bosa, when healthy, could really outplay the contract he's going to get. And I think it's going to be a short-term prove-it contract, especially an extra discount so he can come play with his brother for like 1 year. It's going to be one of those kind of contracts because of his injury history. I don't think Joey Bosa is going to make the type of money on the free agent market that his talent would say he should get because of the injuries. So that's I think the type of move. And when you hear Silver lay it out about value's important and maybe it's not a day one thing, I think that's what we're talking about there. And I think the Ayuk question becomes its own thing, whether, okay, maybe they just don't like Ayuk that much. Maybe they're like, oh, dude, we love Debo and we're going to sign him to another contract after this contract's over. And that's just not going to jive. And we like Ayuk. We just don't love Ayuk like we love some of the other players. And we're okay with maybe trading him away and not spending that money. And we're going to spend that money elsewhere in future years instead of on Brandon Ayuk. So the Ayuk conversation is its own thing. It's like, are you willing to, is he someone that you just don't really want to go that big with a contract with in the future? And if that's the case, you have to be willing to listen to offers for Ayuk. And the Burns thing is probably very unlikely to happen, but I think it's more likely to happen today than it was yesterday. And they could probably make that work, but then you're talking, you're just talking about another huge contract that you have to sign someone like Brian Burns to. And I just don't know if the 49ers want to go that big on a contract, but they could probably make it so, Javon Hargrave ends up going away, and then you're just paying the two big edge rushers on defense and not three defensive linemen all at the same time, potentially. So basically, it's all possible. I don't know, Croc, but man, something big could potentially happen, man.
I think in terms of Ayuk, and we can kind of go back a month or so to what my big brother said. And we were having this conversation about Brandon Ayuk and, targets and how to utilize him. I'm like, man, do a lot of stationary stuff with him. And he said, the 49ers don't value Brandon Ayuk the same way the Cowboys value CeeDee Lamb. And that's not to say that CeeDee Lamb is just this better receiver, right? Like now the numbers speak volume, but again, there's a lot more opportunity. There is a scenario where the 49ers look at their offense and think, and again, I love Brandon Ayuk. You love Brandon Ayuk. I've been banging on the table saying they should be doing more with him, motioning him, a lot more things. But I could see a scenario where they're like, we don't need Brandon Ayuk for this offense to go. Obviously, he's a great piece, and he's taking advantage of his opportunities to the highest extent, leading the league in yards per catch. But what he does, we don't 100% need him on the field. We don't have to pay him 30 plus million, as opposed to like even a Debo Samuel, who, between Debo, Christian McCaffrey, it feels like when games start, or really just in games in general, they are a bigger focal point in the offense in terms of creating a game plan around those guys. When Debo was out, 49er fans was, oh, we don't got Debo though. That's why I lost 3 straight games. And when you just look at how they utilize Brandon Ayuk, he eats in the context of the offense, but it never feels like they're like, all right, this game, we're going to go out, we're going to give Brandon Ayuk 10 to 15 targets. They just don't do it. So if they are a little reluctant, and again, I assume, I'd say 85% sure that, oh, no, they'll bring Ayuk back. They'll take care of him, or he'll come back on his 5th-year option. They'll end up re-signing him, paying him, whatever. They'll get it done maybe around training camp or whatever the case. But if something else happened, like a trade or whatever, I would not at all be shocked, because they haven't showed me that they value him the same way that I feel like a guy of his caliber should be valued in his offense.
Right. And if he's no better than third or fourth option in your offense right now, are you going to project and pay him to be the future 1 or 2 guy, even though you haven't valued him that way yet? And then does that mean all a team has to do is prove that they value him as a number 1 guy and will give you that offer, and you don't value him the same way? And that's how a trade happens.
I think a lot of people will look at his numbers and say, man, look how many yards he had. He had a ton of yards. Of course, they value him as wide receiver 1. But again, you got to look at the targets. How many catches did he have? And his usage in comparison to the other guys is way lower. It's off the top of the head, but was he like 30th in targets in the NFL? But
I
like
don't remember
17
what
yards?
his rank was, but it was he's clearly so much further behind everybody else in targets and catches that he was with when we were looking at the receiving yards numbers and where he was there. Yeah, I mean, he's just way behind, and yeah, efficiency was through the roof there for Brandon Ayuk.
I don't know how much of a drop off you would see in the offense if you took him out, replaced him with somebody, or just utilize somebody else more, a little bit more. But then you got Brian Burns at edge because you did a straight up trade.
The way I look at it is, I would put money that Brandon Ayuk's a better NFL player and a more productive player than Deebo Samuel or Christian McCaffrey or George Kittle in like 2026, 2027. And that's the decision you have to make now if you're the 49ers. And you could have them all together for one more year. You just got to re-up Brandon Ayuk, and then you're going to start losing some of those other pieces. And, Kittle's 30. Christian McCaffrey's getting close to 30. And he's led the league in touches for 2 straight years. He's going to play. I talk about this a lot. It's already improbable what he's done this far and how much of a bionic man he's been for the 49ers. He's going to play 20 more straight games for you next year. And then what about 2025 after that for a running back that touches the ball as much as he does? And Deebo Samuel, I would think that not only is Brandon Ayuk 2 years younger, I think his body's going to age better than Deebo Samuel. So you have to look ahead 2026 because you might be without some of those pieces anyway and not have Ayuk. Well, who's it would be a luxury to have a second, third option at that point. And right now they got 3, 4 options, 5 options on offense. So it's fascinating what the 49ers do here. And we're going to learn a lot about it. And if they, we will know the plan if they do re-up Brandon Ayuk, because the plan will be to use him more. And they trust that he will be that guy, at least in the semi short term and for sure the long term. And if not, then they just don't value him that way. And even though he's behind those guys target wise now, I don't think he will be in the future, but you still have to project that out. So it's going to be fascinating. Arik Armstead, great career with the 49ers. If that is indeed it, we will talk more about that when it becomes official. If Arik Armstead is indeed released and what the 49ers might tamper with Monday, we'll come back Monday evening and break all of that down as well. And of course, we've got prospects ready to go. We're building our Locked On 49ers draft board for April's NFL draft. Thanks to all the everydayers out there. We appreciate everybody who makes us your first listen every single day on the Locked On Podcast Network. Croc and I back tomorrow right here, Locked On 49ers.